Welcome to the brand new podcast where we unpack life's complexities one topic at a time. I am your host, the realist Rob Impact, and this is Complex Context. Thank you for checking out episode 1. I'm glad that you're here, and I'm happy to have another day here where I can bring this to you and really have a new medium for you to go to in terms of being able to hear about and interact, hopefully over time, about all kinds of topics in life that can range from parenting to mental health to retail products to general observations. What this show is designed to be is really just a sounding board for observations and I suppose hopes in terms of what we see and what we have versus where I would like us to be and where you would like us to be. So I'm really encouraging your participation over time, and don't hesitate to reach out. You are always welcome to check us out on our social. We are on X, the former Twitter. Our username is @ComplexContext1. That is Complex Context, the number 1. And from there, you can also visit our official webpage, which we have linked directly on our profile, or you can separately go to the webpage. It's easy either way. Our official site, thanks to our hosting partner Podbean, is at complexcontext.podbean.com, and that's where you can always download any episodes that we have. For the first episode, you're probably like, I don't know who this guy is. Why should I care? Yes, this is another podcast. Why me? Why this one? Well, here's the difference. I actually went to school for communications and broadcasting, unfortunately, and this episode 1 is really just an introduction about me, and you'll have a better understanding as to your host, myself, the realist Rob Impact, and where my mind is, where I come from, and hopefully where I'm going in terms of this show. So I went to school for communications and broadcast media and graduated at probably the worst time ever, which was around the mid-2000s, right when automation was really hitting its stride and most of the traditional terrestrial radio folks were being outsourced to satellite stations and having automation just take their jobs altogether. So I've been lucky enough to be involved with a couple of projects over time, actually a few projects, and you might be able to find this still on the internet. I was a co-host and the producer for a podcast called Bros on Audio, where we spent a lot of time, myself and two of my friends, really just having a good time, a lot of humor, enjoying ourselves, and it kind of has a crossover in terms of its intent to this show, but obviously we're bringing it to a bit more serious level than Bros on Audio was. I also had a music podcast called The Wake Up Call Remixed, which was exclusively on Mixcloud. I want to give a shout out to Mixcloud. If you happen to have a music show that you would like to host and you don't want to go through all of the craziness as far as the legalities of being able to play music, Mixcloud is definitely a partner that I would highly recommend. But I don't want to get too far off the rails. So why this podcast? Well, as you could probably hear, it doesn't sound like I'm talking to you through an echo chamber, and we like to keep quality where it should be. And that's where I'm hoping that we can kind of engage with each other, is you'll enjoy the quality and the production, even though it's a pretty bare bones show in terms of what we're bringing audibly to you, but still it matters, and I'm excited to be here. So let me rewind a little bit here. Who am I? Who is the realist Rob Impact? Well, I am a father and a husband. I have a wonderful wife that I've been married to since 2011. We have a 9-year-old daughter who does fantastic in school. We live in a region south of Boston, Massachusetts, and I am pretty much a lifelong Massachusetts resident. I was born and raised in Brockton, Massachusetts, which is called the City of Champions, thanks to boxing greats Rocky Marciano and Marvin Hagler, both unbelievable athletes that really represented the city well. I grew up during a kind of a rough time in the city as far as a lot of gang violence and just the escalation of a lot of, let's call it, friction between particular groups. So it kind of forced me to learn to really embrace street smarts and to watch yourself, be aware of your surroundings, and really look out for yourself. So some people might say it's rougher than what it needs to be at that time, but I think every major city probably has similar problems, just to varying degrees. And I actually took, in retrospect, anything that I encountered as a positive, for the fact that I think it provided me a platform to compare myself as to what I didn't want to be involved in and want to develop into, and to be aware that you have some places that are a little bit more rough around the edges than others, and you'll be okay as long as you have that awareness. And I always appreciate that. So I love my hometown, Brockton. It's to me always going to have a huge place in my heart, and they have some fantastic food over there. So shout out to Brockton, Massachusetts. Hey, the folks over there, keep on doing what you're doing. It's a matter of just trying to persevere. And I think that's what a lot of this show is going to be about. How can we persevere through the negativity and the things that easily can drag us down and distract us? So, again, we'll touch on that as we continue along. After being born and raised in Brockton, I ended up moving around a lot due to parental divorce that happened when I was younger. But as I continued to grow older and get myself into probably more trouble than what I should have, or at least maybe not trouble so much as hijinks that I really was pretty slick in getting away with, grew out of that, thankfully, and was able to really find myself during my 20s and maybe a little bit of my early 30s, but certainly most of my 20s. And I ended up just meeting, like I said, a wonderful, wonderful woman back in, I want to say it was 08, I believe, early 08, when I first started dating my wife. And we have just been trekking through life together since, and our daughter is great. I have 2 dogs that are both rescues from a shelter up in Woburn, Massachusetts. Look it on Google Maps if you have no idea where Woburn might be. But they are fantastic dogs. They are, one is turning 5, I believe, in a few weeks, and the other one just turned 3. But they are great, and I can get into them in a later time. So I'm a little bit of a complex person myself, which is probably a great reason why I named this show this. Now, why do I say that? I was much more of a free spirit, and when I say that, I don't want to have that come off like a hippie-ish kind of person, but I was able to take things in stride a lot more during younger years, and I think as time has gone on, it has forced my growth and continued progression into adulthood. It's kind of forced my departure from that free-flowing spirit into a more refined person, and I like that to a degree, but there's part of that that really just gets up my backside to no end, and I'm not really sure where I got that from. Part of me thinks my grandfather on my mother's side, he was a very stern and strict, but very loving and intelligent man at the same time. But I know that I'm a little bit more critical on some things than what it needs to be, and it's a constant work on that. So in line with that, I'm always looking to self-improve, and I'm actively in weekly sessions with my therapist. And I'm also, I think I'm at the 7-week point involved in a yoga program, which I do at home. And that actually has been a lot more helpful than I would have ever anticipated, even though I've been poking around at it for a few years. But I enjoy doing yoga quite extensively the few times a week that I do it. So a shout out to all of the fellow yoga people there. And it doesn't have to be anything of grand nature. I mean, if you're stretching, you're doing your best, whether there's a modification involved or not, that's still self-improvement. So I'm trying to improve myself physically, trying to improve myself mentally, but I still, through managing anxiety and just general stress, I can be a bit of a handful. And I really give credit to my family and friends that see that side of me. There's times where I'm like, I don't even know how you guys deal with it when I have those moments. And not like that runs my life, but it does get to be difficult sometimes to look in the mirror and say, you might have been a little bit more of an ass than what you really needed to be. And that's not my intent by any means. It's just that I'm so, I guess, firm and structured with certain decisions or certain expectations on how I and the people around me conduct themselves. And that even goes for stupid stuff, like when you're having a humorous situation, that there's certain ways to conduct yourself. And I'm not really too sure why that is. I have a feeling that as time goes on and the topic kind of presents itself, we'll probably dig deeper into the complexities of myself and why I ended up being someone that has abbreviated patience and expects so much from myself and the people around me. But that is not a knock on anybody by any means. And I think in comparison to a lot of people in the world today, I will still take me any day of the week. This is just who I am. But I am looking forward to continued improvement along the way and hopefully better patience with myself and how I conduct myself in life. So, I have pets, I have a wife, I have a daughter, that I live south of Boston. Now, what are things that I like? All right, well, I'm kind of all over the place here. I like public transportation. I don't know how I could really justify that without really getting into it. Again, we'll save that for another time potentially if we get extensively in that. But I'm a big proponent of taking public transportation, subways, commuter rails, buses, and I have, in relation to that, a model train table in my finished side of the basement, which was a labor of love and really just brings a smile to my face. And I enjoy if we have friends over who have children and they enjoy the concept of little model trains. I like having them down there, and sometimes I'll have them put their hand on the controller and I'll have my hand on it with them, and just to make sure that they don't blow my trains up and have the thing fly off the table. But being able to see a child's face enjoy that and go, wow, that's pretty cool, because it's not a common thing anymore, especially when you think in comparison to, say, 40, 50, 60 years ago. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I'm glad that I can share that labor of love that I worked hard for. So enjoy public transportation. I enjoy my model train table and the trains that I've painted and decaled and repaired. Pro wrestling. Jeez. I've been a pro wrestling fan since about late 1992, and things have just been a roller coaster with that. It's been fantastic to see the progression and not so much the regression of the industry at various times, but when you have certain boom periods where you have a bunch of people really into it, and we are at the time of this recording, at the end of, or I should say the beginning of the second quarter of 2024, it's experiencing a boom period again, and I'm so happy to see that. I'm happy to be a fan who's a part of that, receiving it. It's wonderful. So I'm a big All Elite Wrestling guy, AEW. I'm a reborn, if you will, World Wrestling Entertainment fan. I just came back this year, and you'll hear me talking about, I'm sure, pro wrestling off and on. There's reasons why I was away from that organization for a bunch of years as a fan, and I'm happy to be back watching it, and not because I feel like I have to, but because I genuinely enjoy it. That aside, I know Impact Wrestling was rebranded recently. I haven't been sticking to that organization as much as I'd like to, but I think that's really a scheduling thing, not so much an enjoyment reason why I don't watch that brand. And local independent wrestling, I love going to those shows. I've brought signs before. I've had wrestlers come up to me, give me heck, take my signs, use it in a match. It's really just such a fun time, and I would love to run the production one day in terms of music cueing and, mics, active mics there. But that's a dream that I still have plenty of time to see if that comes to fruition. So pro wrestling is fantastic. If you want to know who my favorite of all time is, or my current favorite, please don't hesitate to reach out to our X account at Complex Context 1 on X/Twitter/ whatever you want to call it. I know it's been X, but you still have to type in twitter.com to get to it. I'm not too sure what Elon Musk's plan is, or if there is a plan in terms of having a different URL in the future, but that's just confusing as heck, and I don't know. I mean, you can't really rebrand unless you're going fully into it. So to keep your old brand as part of your URL, that's just a little bit weird to me. But hey, it's his money, his site. He can do with it as he wishes. So we have model trains. We have pro wrestling. Sometimes I like drawing or coloring. I've done that a lot when I was younger, and have always enjoyed little tiny illustrations or little coloring. Pardon me. I think it's time for a little sip, if you don't mind. See, now I could edit this out, but that wouldn't be real with you. Everybody needs a drink, so hold on one second. Much better. Now, in case you're wondering what I'm drinking, and even if you're not, I'm going to tell you anyways because it's my show. It is the Target brand Favorite Day. They have a soda called Kicking Cola. They actually have multiple sodas under the Favorite Day brand from Target, but this is wonderful. So I decided to try this a few weeks ago, and I really enjoy it. And why do I enjoy it? Well, I haven't been as much of a soda drinker as I used to be in years past. It just doesn't sit well with me. Or I should say specifically, it doesn't sit well with my gastrointestinal system. But it's one can. I believe it is, it is 12 ounces. There's no calories, no sugar, no artificial sweeteners. It uses, now I want to say it's stevia, but I know people say stevia. I think that sounds weird. I don't know. I still want to call it stevia, but that's what's used for the sweetener. And there's really like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ingredients. That's it. So your whole can, you have no calories, no sugars. It's really nice to have a cola that's like that. So I'm impressed. That's what I'm drinking currently. And I'm giving myself a little bit of a break from the water that I've had today because I've been a good guy making sure that we stay hydrated. You always should make sure that you're hydrated. But anyways, back to what I like. So My apologies for that. Pro wrestling model trains, drawing/coloring, and doing some logo work, or I should say cover artwork for digital platforms, or I know I've done plenty for the aforementioned podcast, which I was a part of, as well as some CDs that were produced, and I think a couple of other projects which I might mention in the future. I won't get into it right now, but I enjoy that just as a side gig. One of which is actually a pro wrestling outlet, which utilizes the updated logo that I provided them, and I will give them a shout out as time goes on. But yeah, it's really, really cool. So I have that going for me. I'm kind of all over the place. Sometimes I like fixing things, little trinkets and whatnot. But when I think about listing these things and I tell people that and they say, well, I've had somebody say, you're kind of all over the place, like as far as what you're into. And I look at that as a compliment, because once you start pigeonholing yourself into a certain category, and that's really where you want to put your time and effort. I'm not going to say that there's anything wrong with that. It's your choice to do so. What I am saying is it's nice to switch between interests when you're not, as speaking of interest, I omitted reading. I'm in the middle of a book that I enjoy very much, and I have another one on deck. Again, I'll get into that a little bit later as the show progresses, but it's really important to have that variety, in my opinion, because you're not pigeonholing yourself into expecting that you're always going to be participating in one particular thing that interests you. And you don't have to maintain that type of interest to the point that it's just more of a chore than it is an enjoyment. And I think a lot of people with their hobbies, and we'll kind of transition over to this right now, I always tell people, make sure you have hobbies. Make sure you have multiple things that you like doing. And some people look at me like, nah, I just kind of really like one thing. And hey, you do you. I'm not going to try and change you, but I want you to understand that there is such value in making sure that you're in a lot of different, you have your hands in a lot of different concepts, because I think it just provides you that outlet for you to wake up and say, okay, I have time for me. I can do something that I want. What do I want to do? And rather than know what you're going to do, which there, again, is nothing wrong with it, and is, of course, is very easy, at the same time, it's pretty cool to be able to say, well, I could do this, or I could do that. And knowing that you have those options, I think, puts you in a better position in relation to whatever factors may coincide with that. For example, is there a financial responsibility in participating in a certain hobby, or do you have the resources already there versus do you have to procure them to be able to participate? I.e., if you're going to build model rockets, do you already have your rockets built? And if so, do you already have your engines that burn off every time you fly it? Versus, let's say, illustration. Pen, paper, or crayons, markers, paper. It's a lot more achievable to complete participation in that, because it's typically a pretty plentiful and easily available set of materials to engage in. And it's really a balance of what do you want to do versus how much do you want to put that effort into making sure that you have those resources available to do that. I wouldn't want to have a hobby where necessarily you have to always spend $50-$60 every time you have a thought about it, because at that point it's more, well, I suppose it depends on what it is, but it would come off like it's more work than what it needs to be, because I just want to go grab something and just go to town, right? I don't want to have a lot of prep work. I don't want to have to worry about, can I afford participating in a certain hobby? I just want to know that I'm able to do it. And having that variety just helps that cause. You're able to say, okay, I already have this available to me. Or I did this, now I want to do something else, which is equally as fulfilling and equally as affordable. So I always encourage people, do multiple things, be into multiple things, create, imagine, get your hands dirty. And if you do want to tunnel that down into maybe one or two things in particular, that's okay. As long as you're okay with the concept that you're giving yourself those options as the go-tos. And if you're okay with that, then that's beautiful. But I would hate to know that people continue, unfortunately, sometimes to pigeonhole themselves into this one concept or maybe one or two, and they exhaust it so much that it just isn't enjoyable anymore. I couldn't do that at this point. I would really like to continue kind of a broad spectrum of interests. And regardless of how this show is currently or how it may do and perform in the future, I always will enjoy broadcasting and audio production. And this is just really an opportunity for me to get back into it and kind of test the waters out, see if there is the market of folks like yourself that's like, I just need somebody to talk to. And that's really kind of what this is about, is I'm giving a platform for us to talk with each other, which is why I encourage you to reach out. Again, if you want to get in touch with me and you want to give a review of the show, or maybe you have an idea about a topic or two you would like to discuss. And if so, if you have your own opinions that you would like to contribute towards that topic, please don't hesitate. You can find us on X / Twitter. I don't know how long I'm going to continue to clarify that, but that will be short-lived, trust me. For now, we'll keep calling it both. Our username is at ComplexContext1. You can also email us at complexcontextshow@yahoo.com. And any episodes and links to these communication methods can be found on the official homepage, thanks to our wonderful distribution partner at Podbean. The website is complexcontext.podbean.com. That's PODBEAN, complexcontext.podbean.com. In talking about interests, one thing that I also omitted was technology, and I suppose our country's affinity for broadband options and news. I always enjoy seeing what's being offered in terms of new ways to watch and engage in content, though I don't watch a heck of a lot of content beyond, say, pro wrestling, UFC, and the Boston Celtics, which at the time of this recording had a wonderful game, blowing out the Miami Heat by over 20 points. It was beautiful. I'm hoping that is a sign of continued consistency throughout these playoffs, but we'll see. Shout to the Boston Celtics team. Thank you for having such a wonderful organization to watch this season. It's really been fantastic, really entertaining. That's pretty much me in a nutshell. And I want to know about you. And what do you want to talk about? Some of the topics that you'll likely hear in future episodes will discuss things such as how people drive. We'll talk about manners. Oh, manners is going to be a big one. Big one. We'll talk about personal vices. What do you like to kind of engage in and relax with? What's your vice? What's your go-to? I would love to hear some of the options, and I'm sure whatever they are, I probably can meet it with a been there, done that. So no hesitation on that. We'll talk about raising kids and what our expectations are in terms of how we should be as parents versus what other resources that we surround ourselves and surround our kids with, what their involvement and participation should look like. We'll talk about things such as relationship difficulties. I don't want to get too much into that because that's a heavy topic, so I'm going to wait for that. That kind of gives you an idea of going all around the spectrum. And then, of course, we're going to just banter back and forth, such as me telling you about Kickin' Cola, the favorite day soda from Target, which I highly recommend. So let's get back to that, actually. This is what complex context is. Let me give context as to why I would recommend this. I'm historically a big Coca-Cola guy. I've enjoyed their beverages a lot growing up. But as I've continued to approach my middle-age self, it hasn't really been as much of an enjoyment unless it's coming from, say, a soda fountain. But when you're talking about the prepackaged product, it just doesn't sit well as much as it used to. And I just as well assume, hey, after a while, your body is just going to say, I don't have really as much time for this. And that's totally fine. But I still like to know that beyond my water intake or my hydration drink intake, that I can have something a little extra without feeling weighed down. And I came across this, which I decided to try on a whim, and I thought that was fantastic. And I would hope that other companies continue to be creative and innovative in terms of being able to offer a product that satisfies a desire without having to sacrifice one's comfort or health. And that's not a dig at any particular company. The reality of it is, a lot of the food and beverages in the United States these days, it's just so disposable and full of junk. So to be able to find a product such as this that you still feel relatively good about, yeah, man, I want to encourage you to try that. Let's talk about it. And maybe what I'll do coming out of this is post a picture of it on our X account at Complex Context 1. And that way you can kind of have an idea next time if you go to Target, if you're a Target guy like me. If not, that's okay. Not everybody can be cool when they have to go shopping. But if you do, or you would like to try going to Target, I would like you to try this Kickin' Cola. See what you think about it. Now, if you've never had this stevia, again, I want to say stevia, personally. Don't hold it against me. Leaf extract, which is the primary sweetener used, it might be a little different to you. And as a friend of mine, John, who I had try it, said, and I totally agreed with him because I had the same experience. The first sip, maybe even the second, it hits you a little bit different. It hits your palate a little differently, so you don't really know how to take it. But after that first or second sip, then it just goes down so smooth, and you're like, okay, I get it. And that's pretty cool. So definitely try it. Kickin' Cola. I encourage it. Another thing that we will likely talk about off and on as time goes on is our overall well-being. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, it would be easy for me to just say mental health, right? But we're far beyond just a mental capacity in terms of our general being. You know, we're physical, we're emotional. It's an all-encompassing premise. I consider that our overall well-being. And as part of my personal journey lately in kind of reestablishing my well-being, I think it's important for people to understand about one's experiences and the potential resources that are out there. And sometimes it's a little bit more awkward of a topic than what we feel comfortable discussing or admitting. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with being open and honest with each other about it. And I think it provides a symbol of strength for the person who is actively seeking methods or resources to better their overall health and well-being. So I want to make sure that we touch on that. And I have some recommendations that I would be happy to provide in the future to you. So what would you like to talk about? Please don't hesitate. If you have something on your mind, man, you know what really bugs me? Or you know what I'd really like to hear an opinion about? Send it over. Feel free. Just drop a line. It doesn't hurt. At Complex Context 1 on X/Twitter or complexcontactshow@yahoo.com over email. I would be happy on either one. We don't have Facebook at the current time. I don't know if we will. I don't really want this to turn into a manage multiple social media outlets for one show. And that's something that I know a lot of content creators these days do and organizations do. And the more that you spread yourself out there, which I suppose is good in terms of capturing audiences as a whole, because you're not guaranteed to be on multiple platforms. The reality is the more that you put into all of that is the less time and focus that you have, not just for yourself, but for the main core thing that you're trying to provide. And for us, that's this show, right? The main thing is this show being able to talk to each other as humans and have this banter and talk about things that are on our mind or might be of concern, and not make this into a gigantic, multifaceted, interwoven social media hot mess. It gets so messy when I see a lot of content creators or certain shows that they'll post one thing on one social platform, another thing on another social platform, and there's really no uniformity. And even when there is, you're kind of left wondering, what is the better option that I should go to? What I have two very different resources providing equal content, and I just personally don't feel that we're in that position right now where we have to spread out beyond what we currently have. Instagram, I have a personal Instagram. I enjoy being on that. But again, this is a podcast, and the reason why I enjoy being a part of a podcast and have enjoyed it for the prior ones that I've done, and even when I was doing radio locally years ago, is you can't really replace an audible concept like this. And by that, I mean we are on our devices for so much, most of which I think is unnecessary because society has just kind of gone towards that route of, if it can be put on a website or an electronic device, let's do it. And yes, there's ease of use and accessibility when you're talking about that, but we're also depersonalizing our day-to-day, and that really drives me up the wall. The great thing about a show like this and any podcast that you're engaged with is you have to listen. You have to listen. There's really no other way around it to really digest the majority of what you're hearing or you want to hear or you want to enjoy. You have to give a certain degree of your attention to this platform, and there's no negotiating around it. It's the gray area really doesn't exist unless you put something on for background noise, and even at that, I'd be happy to be your background noise. There's nothing wrong with that. But this show really is just for us to discuss a bunch of things, and my hope is if you don't have really the expectation one way or another of what comes out of future episodes, I will say, without knowing myself, I would love to have rotating guests on here with me discussing some of these topics. And if you're interested in that, if you have a personal vested interest in a particular topic, let me know. Communicate that. And we'll see if that can become a reality and come to fruition, We'll figure that out. I don't know. I'm not promising anything, but I think it's important for people who feel a certain way on particular subject matter, if they're eloquent enough to be able to participate. And I don't mean in terms of you sound like your vocabulary is 3/4 of the Oxford Dictionary. I don't mean that, but I mean in terms of your mindset and your emotions and your being able to justify why you feel the way you feel on certain things. Yeah, let me know that there's interest. That would be great. And then we could share this with everybody out there in podcast land. So I appreciate your time, your willingness, and Complex Context is a podcast of personal enjoyment to be able to, again, have a sounding board for us to communicate, to drop all of the social media bull and the gloom and doom of American media and everything about that. We're not going to get into anything that is meant to cause or maintain divisiveness, which is rampant in today's society. This is just meant for us to have discussions, and I want you to be a part of that. Check us out on the official website. Thanks to our distribution partner, Podbean. Our website is complexcontext.podbean.com. And our X/Twitter account is @ComplexContext1. Our email is complexcontextshow@yahoo.com. And I think what I'm going to enjoy now is a snack, because I had my dinner and I said the show title 3 times in succession without stumbling at all. So with that kind of wordplay to come out that smoothly, I'm going to congratulate myself. So I want you to enjoy your day, enjoy yourself, make sure that you look after you and the people you love, and we're going to have some good discussions, I have a feeling, as time goes on. We're going to talk about what we do really well and what we do terribly, and why it's my fault, or why it's your fault, or why it's nobody's fault, and how we can be better from that. So thank you again. I am the voice of Complex Context, the realist Rob Impact. Do what you do it often, do it well. Just don't do anything I wouldn't do, and you'll be doing all right. I'll see you soon, but really I'll be speaking to you soon. Maybe I'll see you soon, I don't know. But thank you so much. Look forward to it. Until the next episode, you take care.